thought I was a horse. A horse, I thought I was, of course. Strong and lean and a running machine. But you could pass by me and I would not be seen.
Hello, my amazing friend, Jenna
Beautiful.
Robertson. How are you today?
I'm stoked to be here. You're one of my favorite people.
You are one of my favorite people, and I am thrilled to be interviewing you for this course. I can't believe we're already up to week 6, which is all about the power and pleasure of process. And I know that this is a theme you enjoy talking about. And you're actually doing a doctorate on creative process at the moment, which we will talk about later, I am sure. But I want to introduce everyone to you. Scottish-Australian Jenna Robertson is an internationally award-winning independent creative performer and arts leader based on Wangaratta country, Gold Coast hinterland, Australia. She has worked for almost 20 years as a singer, writer, creative director, and producer in opera, music, and film. Jenna is also a certified life coach for creatives and leaders seeking to bring more of themselves to their work and life. Jenna's presence, coaching, and facilitation is heart-opening, otherworldly, and transformational, and she works with clients worldwide and across sectors. I can attest to this because I was your coaching client, Jenna, and you are otherworldly and transformational. So it's very exciting to be able to interview you about your process. Before we get into that, I'd love to ask you a question that I've been asking everyone. What does creativity mean to you?
I will get to this question, but before I do that, I must also, thank you for having me and acknowledge how we know each other, which is we met through our coaching training. So while I have been a coach for Emma, I have also been a client for Emma.
This is true.
And I have experienced the beauty, the safety in her space holding. And so my understanding of creativity has actually been enhanced and expanded by working with you, Emma. So I acknowledge the part that you have played in all that I share today. I can't move forward without acknowledging that. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, thank you so much. The feeling is mutual.
Fab. Well, creativity for me personally, self-expression. I'm feeling this already, feeling like as soon as I even think about what creativity is, I feel this like fire of like, because for me, it's also about agency, reclaiming self, reclaiming my space, reclaiming my voice. And the reason I have this sort of fiery energy about it is because I have felt for a long time what it means to not be able to express those things. So for me, this creativity has been, a joy throughout my whole life, but also this incredible mechanism for expanding myself and expressing myself. Yeah, there's something to begin with.
That's so beautiful. I think one of the things that I love so much about you, and something that resonates very deeply with me as a creative person, as a performer, as a maker of things, is your love for the creative process. Yes, the end product is obviously really important and satisfying, but perhaps the most exciting thing is that sort of crack yourself open, life-changing experience of expansion and yumminess that comes from the actual creative process itself. What is the most enjoyable thing about the process of creation for you?
The most enjoyable thing, it's so hard to choose one.
Yeah.
But the most enjoyable thing, I think, are those moments where we interact with something mystical. And so for me, that could look like some picture or thought coming in that is clearly from this beautiful source that is not my brain. And maybe also this sort of magical, excuse me, this sort of magical coming together process, which can happen. I mean, sometimes it's just going to drop some F-bombs. I hope that's okay.
Please do.
Sometimes it's fucking hard and it doesn't come together easily. But in the right conditions with the right people and the right energies, sometimes there is this magical sort of finishing of or coming together of different pieces. So for me, witnessing those moments is probably the most joyful and exciting part.
Oh, I love that. You just touched on, this kind of mystical, magical element to creating. Does it feel sometimes like you're a vessel for something outside of yourself when you're creating?
Absolutely. But that's been a journey to understand and to get to. And I think I might share something that's fairly brief to explain a bit more about what I mean about that. There might be some people listening who completely get it, and others who may feel that it's a foreign concept. My mentor, Emily, talks about the process of to me, something happening to me, by me, or through me. There's kind of three parts. And I feel like that's been the journey definitely for me. This experience of initially something happening to me, particularly as I'm talking earlier about being someone who can't fully express myself. I've had a background in the opera sector. I'm not really in it anymore, but that's where I experienced a lot of that. There's no other word than oppression, really, as a singer, because of the structures that have to be in place. So that was kind of like a to me, this is happening to me. And then I sort of went into this expanded process of this is being created by me. And that was a real kind of empowering period where I felt like, this is written by Jenna Robertson. I'm like, yes, I'm really empowered. I'm expanding my creativity. It feels really good. And then I felt like part 3 was like, which is where I feel I am now, is more the through me. And I think Elizabeth Gilbert's TED Talk about creativity, you know it.
I was thinking of Elizabeth Gilbert as we're discussing this. Yes.
Yes. I think that if this resonates, I say, like, pause this, go watch.
Yes, I'll put a link to that, to this talk. Yes.
Yes, where she talks about this sort of really helpful separation between us, the vessel, and the actual source of creativity and life force, really. So this is a huge topic, but there's a little bit.
I love it. Thank you so much for explaining that. I would love you to now share with us your creative process. And I'm sure, with each project, it might be slightly different, but, can you walk us through how you go about the art of creating something?
Yes, I can. I think at this stage, there's something that's really present from the creative goblins, as one of my clients beautifully named, is to share that the creative process, we're talking about it here in the context of making works and making artworks, but it's something we do all day.
Yeah.
So it's not something that you don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it because we do it all day.
Yeah.
Even, what am I going to make for dinner, through to making dinner is the creative process.
Absolutely.
How am I going to form this sentence for Emma is the creative process. So I just want to normalize that in a way and open that up. Because even as we make those choices during the day, we can witness ourselves and what's going on inside. And that process from it going from a thought form to something in the physical.
Yeah.
Which could be a beautiful lentil dal.
Yes.
I think that's what Emma made the other night. That's why I used that.
Made. Oh, yes.
Or it could be an opera or a film.
Yeah.
Or it could be a painting or a poem. So, I mean, I could talk a lot about this, so I'll try to be brief. For my process, I think at the moment I'm looking to the side because I've written 7 steps down. So I'll just go through them briefly. But even within these 7 steps, there are kind of ways of being within those 7 steps that influence the outcome, which I know you'll be learning about from Emma in this course. So for me, step 1 would be conceptualization. It's probably one of my favorite parts, where I mean, I think, oh gosh, I could give a seminar on conceptualization, so it's quite hard to summarize it. But what I'm thinking about right now is this Japanese concept of ikigai.
I'm reading a book called Ikigai at the moment. Of course, we're very linked, aren't we, Jenna?
Yes, we're a bit psychic. We can.
Yes. Wow.
Very connected, you and I. So, if you know what ikigai is, then I'll just explain it for those who don't. Oh gosh, I'll probably do a crap job of explaining it because I haven't looked at it for a while. But there's it's like one of those Venn diagrams with four pieces. Emma, tell me if I missed one, right? So there's looking at what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can be paid for. Look, I think that's optional for this point in time, but if it's something that you're trying to make money from, then that can be like a 4th part of the Venn diagram. So maybe you can link this as well, Emma.
Absolutely.
So that's what came to mind initially, is sort of finding that sweet spot between what you're good at, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can make money from. But I think that's very much like a sort of a professional lens. And it doesn't feel very right at the moment, especially because over the last couple of years, I've been feeling a bit less connected to this what the world needs piece, because sometimes that can get really heavy. Yeah. And I've been stifled by that. I've been burned out by that. And I've been burned out by trying to meet the expectations of others. So as I share that piece about conceptualization, I'm also, it may help some people, and it also comes with a warning. So essentially, yeah, I think maybe I should just keep moving on, because I've got 6 more to get through.
I love it.
But it's probably my favorite bit is to talk about that.
It's like the dreaming phase. Is that right? We have a week where we're discussing the joy of dreaming up these juicy ideas. Is that the same thing as the conceptualization phase for you? Is it the dreaming, allowing yourself to just kind of imagine?
Yes, that openness of the dreaming time. Um, um, and if I just say one more thing about that you've inspired is that sometimes the mind can be not so helpful in this period. Like, for example, I went through a period where I had such a past reference of opera that when I was trying to conceptualize a project, all I could think about was, well, this needs to be an opera. That's from the mind. Because to stick form on something at the beginning, it's a bit like, you know, having a 5-year-old and saying, well, you're going to be a lyric coloratura soprano. You know, it's so
we love to put things in little boxes. We love to attach label to things. And when you're in that phase, sometimes it can be really detrimental to do that. Instead of just allowing the dreaming, the imagination to just paint the picture.
Yes, allowing. This is one of the beautiful words that you just said. Yes, the allowing and the openness, remaining open to what the thing may become.
Yes.
And just as an example, I birthed a project that I thought was going to be an opera that's probably now becoming a film. And that's a reflection of my consciousness, my mind getting involved in the conceptualization. So yeah, I feel like it's at this time it's so beautiful to advocate for the natural growth and evolution of that creative thing you're birthing, and not put labels on it just yet.
Yeah, beautiful.
So then after that is kind of, I've called it threads of consciousness, where there's something emerging and then noting down things that are connected to it in some way. So each one of us has this incredibly uniquely programmed and data present in our brains, which means that messages that are coming through are so unique. So in this part, for me, it's about capturing almost every thought that I have about this particular thing, even if it doesn't make sense to me at this point, because the creative force that's working through me knows a lot more than my mind does. So it's also about keeping that open, and noting down threads of consciousness. So for me, that might look like a document that's or a thing on the wall like this, which just has a whole bunch of different stuff, but I don't know how it necessarily fits together or what it means yet. It's just the things that are coming through me, capturing them.
I love in songwriting. I worked a little bit with a wonderful songwriter called Lee Carriage, and she calls this in you know, from a songwriting perspective, the word salad. You know, and so, you know, you've got this theme. Let's just, you know, write down everything that we can think of to do with this theme, even if they don't connect. And then you kind of find the connection between, you know, these threads. So yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Threads of consciousness. Yeah, word salad.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my coaching with you, Emma, you have asked me to make a word salad, I think.
Ah, there we go.
Or maybe it was that you asked yourself to make a word salad. I love this.
Delicious.
And what you said also resonates with the next step that I have, which is this sorting and sense making. So like, then once all the stuff's out, you've got your big word salad, or you've got your threads of consciousness, all this stuff. It doesn't really make sense yet. You sit down, and this is where the mind is useful, because the mind can start to notice little patterns or put things together like a jigsaw puzzle, and starts to have some little parts that make sense.
And often, you know, in that process, I don't know about you, but sometimes I've found that these threads that kind of come together might not even form part of that particular project or song. They might, you might put them aside and go, oh, I really like that. Doesn't fit here, but maybe it's going to fit in this project or this song, you know? So it's so important, I think, to just be writing down anything that's sort of coming through you, even if it doesn't make sense, because you never know how you're going to use it in the future.
That is so wise and beautiful. And I love that it really honors, like, to me, I'll use the word sacred, like these things, and for me, they come from here, which is why I always point this way. So like,
Wow.
like, if they're coming to me, they're coming to me for a reason. If they're coming to you, Emma, they're coming to you for a reason, because it can come through your brain and through your being.
Yeah.
And so there's like an honoring in that. That's maybe it's not going to end up in this particular work as you've suggested, but there's a respect for it as well. Like maybe it's not destined for this work, but it's being given to you. So it may turn into something else. I love this so much.
I love that.
Do you want me to keep going?
Please, this is amazing.
Okay. It's really, I'm certain that it's so similar to other people you'll be talking to and to yourself. These are just the words that come through my brain. So the next part I've got going further and co-creating with the universe.
Ooh.
So I'm just thinking myself here. There might be some eye rolls from some and some like excitement from another. At this point, it's like I can usually see what's missing and what I need to work on. And then that's the point where I'd be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and do the Elizabeth Gilbert thing. Like I'm going to show up. She talks about showing up for the process and inviting in the collaborators, and bringing that in. So for me, particularly, like some kind of hacks in that phase is sitting down. Often for me, this involves some sort of writing. So I love to put headphones on and stick on a particular music that's got a particular sort of feeling. And that really helps me to get into a particular frequency or space to write. And of course, fed, watered, safe. For me, it's also a little bit like need a bit of a tidy house. And some people.
Yeah, I completely relate to that. My brother, in order to create, he needs to put his shoes on. He works from home, but he's like, I can't do anything unless I put my shoes on. It's different little things for different people, and finding what you need in order to get into that space is so important. So for you, yes, I'm so similar. Bit of a tidy house.
Yeah.
Glass of water, cup of tea or coffee or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Tony in his shoes. That's so awesome. I have to say at this point that Emma Dean is one of the most exquisite people I know at just sitting down and doing it. So I am less good at this than Emma is. So I know that she's got a module on this. So yeah, honoring Emma's brilliance in this way. I also
there's a lot of sort of crying babies happening, at the moment. And yeah, so it is embracing the chaos, which is another one of our weeks, our themes for the week. So yes, I thank you for acknowledging that.
Absolutely. It's something that I really admire about you. No, I've talked about having a tidy house, Tony's shoes, your lemon tea. But obviously sometimes that's not possible. And often there are deadlines if we're doing this in a space where we're required to finish something by a particular time. And so sometimes I have to get over myself and not, and do it with a messy room or, and so in those sort of times, then I will, the music helps me a lot. So listening to something and, even just a candle or just some sort of ritual to kind of get into a place where we can flow. So
the things that you are describing are actually really simple things. They're things that you can, like, for instance, putting on a pair of shoes to make you feel like you're ready to kind of enter the creative zone. That's a very achievable thing. Having a quick tidy of your desk, that's a very achievable thing. So yeah, I think it is important, you know, to acknowledge what you need to feel good about, you know, starting that or making a start. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So the last parts of my process are what we're already talking about, this moving to completion, which may be beautiful and sort of organic, or it may be like punk.
When you've got a deadline, especially, which I know you have had in the last year, some really intense deadlines, like a very short period of time in which you've had to work through all 7 of those stages, right? So yeah, sometimes it's not, you know, having the luxury of time. You do have that really hard deadline. You've got a performance date. It's got to be done. You're on stage.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Especially also when we start to involve things like theaters and venues, and which can be very expensive, and collaborators who charge by the hour, and you know, it's sometimes there are such practical limitations. And I think something that's really important at this phase is letting go, and because we're in the earlier phases, we're very much in this open visioning, creating, expanding phase, and then there is a time where I find if that is always there, it's not helpful for getting to the completion point. For me, it's like starts like this and then it goes like this.
Yes.
So very much in this.
I totally get that.
Yeah, like that.
I love physicalizing things. This feels good.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's also the producer in me that understands that need from a practical perspective as well. That to move into that completion point. So sometimes that can mean letting go of a particular idea, letting go of a particular standard, and sometimes that's hard, but it's definitely necessary. Sometimes. Then the last parts are really the sharing and presenting.
Yes.
Which is so fun. And the final part I have here is evaluate. Excuse me.
Which is actually a stage that a lot of people kind of forget about. Tell me a bit about that final stage.
So important, and you're so right. It's often skipped. I skipped it for a long time.
So did I. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so important to. It's like, for me, it's it's like a cycle. So this process, I've described it as 1 to 7, but it's a cycle. And as I finish one creative project or idea, then it's always going back around. So if we don't have that period where we sit and look at what happened, we can miss so much. So there can be discoveries of personal learnings. And of course, sometimes the hindsight can provide personal wisdom.
Yes.
You know how I mentioned about how the mind doesn't always know what's happening? Sometimes I get to the end and I go, wow, I thought that work was about this and it was totally about something else. And I have such compassion for myself. And which happened to me last year. And then I think I know that Emma will talk a lot about this in the course, but sometimes looking at the feedback from people. To look at the impact of the creative work, because I'm very motivated by the change that can be enabled within the people who experience my work. I'm very motivated by that. So I'm interested to see how they experienced it. This can be so beautiful and so hard. When I had one experience with a work that I made last year that was the most vulnerable one that I've ever made. And as a result of that heart opening, the feedback that came was equally, like, people felt that they had their own hearts cracked open. And I also had one person who hated it. hated it so much he posted on the internet about it and like wrote to the institution about how they should never employ me again. So that was really hard. If you can imagine, opening yourself up to some of the most, honestly, I spoke of one of the most intimate and vulnerable experiences of my life that was extremely hard. And yet that's triggering for some people. So the evaluation can sometimes, looking at these can be, for me, that was a huge process of personal growth. It's always that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk to you about, a moment of deep self-discovery for you, coming towards the end of a project, and, how it sometimes a project changes us from the beginning to the end. I'd love to know, has there been an example, or can you share with us an example of like this kind of, deep self-discovery that you've experienced from some of your creations?
Yes. Sorry, my voice is tired. I was on a Zoom call like 2:30 in the morning this morning with in the US.
No. Oh
So
my
my
gosh.
voice is not working very well. So
You sound beautiful as always, but
oh gosh.
I empathize.
It's early in the morning for us in
Yeah.
London. So yes, look, I think I use my creative process as a way to explore deep challenges and deep complexities that I see and feel. So as a result of that, the creative process itself is often this incredible container for me to create understandings of those questions that are at the center of my creative process.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not until music for me just is such a way for my emotions to be accessed and felt. And so sometimes it's not until I hear a piece of music in the context of a question that I'm exploring that I sort of start to make sense of things. So in that respect, it's happened a few times where I've been able to make sense of complex questions that have been in my life through the creative process.
That's so powerful. And it is, and I guess it does make that final stage of evaluation and getting feedback sometimes feel even more scary, because, these self-discoveries can be so precious. But some of the works that we're talking about don't just have one life, they've got multiple lives. So to skip over that final phase would be a disservice to the work, as hard as it is. And we're one of the themes for our weekly learnings is meeting the outer critic. We talk a lot about our inner critic, but how to go about navigating other people's opinions, and that's a really tricky one for people putting creative work out into the world, because it is really precious. But thank you so much for touching on that and explaining your incredible creative process to us all. I'd love to know, because for me, there is, without a doubt, a moment in time when I am creating something where things get a little sticky and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? is this worth it? Why am I doing this? And I always have that little voice, that inner critic, come and sit on my shoulder and say, you're an idiot. What are you doing? You know, and this is, you know, how many decades have we been doing this? That little bloody voice still pipes up and has a go at me. Has that happened to you? Does that happen to you? And how do you move through it?
Absolutely, it happens. It's like the questions I hear are, is this going to be shit? Are people going to like this? Why are you doing this? It's not your particular area, or like it's like, yeah. So I think that that's part of the human condition. These things exist, these egoic thoughts, if you like, that essentially are trying to keep us safe. Because this part of our system thinks that there's a danger in our sharing. So I think that starts to open up how do I deal with it, is to recognize that that's what it is. Now, if there is a genuine safety issue, you know, that's a thing.
Totally.
Which there may be, especially, yes, so that may be a genuine concern if there is a physical, mental, psychological safety thing going on. However, in general, the sharing of art, I think it's fair to say, is not dangerous. So if that is the case, then I recognize what's going on, that this thing is trying to keep me safe. Firstly, this thing is not me, by the way. Me is actually the thing that sits behind it and observes it. The thoughts are not me. So this is something that's happening to me that is trying to keep me safe. It's come from a previous experience in life. I recognize it, thank it for trying to keep me safe, and politely, respectfully tell the voice that I'm going to keep going and I'm going to trust. Because one thing I know for sure is that the more authentically I show up, the more Jenna that I bring, the more powerful it's going to be for the people who experience it, who are on the same wavelength. That's why I do it, and I trust that process. So I hope that makes sense.
That makes complete sense. And I'd love to ask, have you ever experienced that voice or that stickiness and realized that actually maybe it is a good time to stop the project? Has that ever happened? And how do you navigate that? How do you know when something is worth pushing through, or if it is in fact time to pivot?
I love your question so much, Emma. She asks amazing questions like this in her coaching sessions as well. Yes, I have. So I think for me, I think this shows up in relation to perhaps the environments that creativity happens in. And for me, that's like the container of the creative process is so important to me. If that's not right, i.e. if perhaps some of the collaborators are not, that don't have my back, or that there's some different, like perhaps there's a competitive dynamic, or there's a dynamic that is not able to be resolved through vulnerable and authentic communication, then sometimes I think for me, this is where this shows up, is knowing who do I continue working with and who do I have to stop the relationship, the creative collaboration relationship with. And that happens. And I think it happens particularly to beings who change quickly, like myself. I change quite quickly. Sometimes my collaborator can't come with me on that process, or doesn't want to come with me on that process, and I respect their agency. So absolutely, definitely part of the process. It can be very tricky.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have one final question for you, and it's a question that I have asked all of the wonderful people I've been interviewing. If you could impart one piece of advice to someone who is rediscovering their creativity, and I say rediscovering because I think we are all born with an innate sense of creativity. So someone who is rediscovering their creativity, what would that piece of advice be?
Gosh, that A word is always a bit like in my system, because I always
So
feel
how can we, what's another word?
I'll reframe it. So because I value each individual's agency and uniqueness so much that I feel like if I don't know you or I don't know them, then I'm not in a position to give advice. But what I will share is something that I know for sure, which is that each of us are unique and different and have something unique and different to say and share, and that no two creative processes are the same. That your creative process is your unique gift to the world. And I say creative process, not your creative outcomes. The creative outcomes are a beautiful thing to have at the end, but the process itself, I think, is where so much of the juice lies. So I think what I'm saying is that I think that your creative process is beautiful, whatever it looks like, because it's an expression of you. And the second thing is to love the process and lean into the process and how it can change you and inspire you, and perhaps less focus on what the actual outcome is.
Thank you so much, Jenna. That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I have found that with every person I've talked to in this course, I am learning more and more about creativity and about myself. There is always something to learn and always something new to explore, which makes it so exciting. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me today and to share with all of us. I appreciate it so, so much. Can you tell everyone what you're currently working on, or where we can find what you are currently working on, keeping in mind this course might be coming out in a few months' time?
Sure. My website is jennarobertson.com. And I mentioned that I change a lot, so the website evolves with me. The frames and the understandings of what I do shift, so that will reflect whatever time you're watching this interview. The website will reflect my current reality.
Yeah.
Instagram at I am Jenna Robertson. Yeah, and what I'm working on right now, I want to share that when I was coaching one-on-one with Emma, I had been trying to reactivate a music composing skill set, which had kind of been dormant for a very long time. And Emma helped me to find that again. And during my one-on-one coaching with Emma, I wrote some lyrics and vocal melodies. That has become part of an album that I will be releasing in October. I very humbly invited Emma to collaborate with me on the finishing of that track, and so Emma is a co-writer on that particular track. The reason I share this is to honor the part that you have played, Emma, in this current project that is a large focus of my time, my debut album in October. Uh,
So exciting.
it's
So
a pleasure to work
exciting.
with you. And then I've also got an opera in development called Spirit Orphan, which is a very long project, 7 years probably, as well as a feature documentary project that is sort of looking at that and documenting it. And I have made I work for planetariums in Australia with a full dome film environment, and I'm hoping that my most recent work, Endless Universe, will be touring to different cities this year, I hope. Waiting on some funding outcomes. And I consider my doctoral research creative project as well. So I continue with that work, which is really looking at the intersection of the creative process and leadership, because for me, they're very, very similar. There's so many overlaps, and so that fascinates me. Yeah.
Oh, Jenna, I will put links in the notes so people can go to your website and your socials and find out all about you and what you're doing. I'm so excited for everything that is happening for you. Thank you so much again. It's been such a joy to speak with you. You're a fucking unicorn, just quietly. All right, my love. Take care.
Just in case you didn't hear me. I am a fucking you.